of Africa. Good evening once again. The program begins right now, and from the highlight, I'm sure you've realized that this is a special edition of Bottomline Africa, and we're talking about developments down south as far as the political situation in South Africa is concerned. And our Twitter poll, of course, it's informed by this particular topic, and we're asking you, should political parties in Africa be empowered to recall non-performing leaders? Should political parties in Africa be empowered to recall non-performing leaders? ANC in South Africa, the oldest political party, has done so. So we'd like to hear your view on this. Our Twitter handle is at KTN News. You can as well tweet me at Yusuf Ibra. As always, the hashtag to use is Bottomline Africa. Maybe the question is, what governance lessons might the rest of the continent learn from South Africa? We're not saying South Africa is perfect, but it's a very rare occasion when political parties recall the sitting president. So in studio to discuss this with me is Mark Bichachi, a political communication strategist. We also have Bernard Med Otieno with me in studio. He is from the Africa Peer Review Mechanism Youth Group. And joining me from South Africa is Dewa Maringa, who is a Human Rights Watch, from the Human Rights Watch. And I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting conversation. So let me begin with our top story tonight. South Africa's ruling party has ordered Jacob Zuma to step down as head of state after marathon talks over the fate of a leader whose scandal-plagued years in power darkened and divided Nelson Mandela's post-apartheid rainbow nation. Leading members of the African National Congress now want the party's new leader, Cyril Ramaphosa, to replace Zuma as president. And his Secretary General S. Magashule told journalists, of course he told journalists that, but the ANC National Executive was split on precisely when Zuma should go. The decision to order Zuma's recall followed 13 hours of tense deliberations in one short face-to-face exchange between Zuma and Ramaphosa.
We went with the DSG today to meet with the president and communicate the decision of the NEC. So as we communicated this decision, obviously we are giving him time and space to respond. We haven't given him any deadline to respond. The NEC officials, we are not a decision-making body. We are part of the collective. We then went to the NEC, but the NEC said because of transition and uncertainty, we really need to take a decision. The ANC for now has not put any motion of no confidence. Whatever processes which are supposed to happen in Parliament once we had a response, I think that's what will actually happen. So it's obvious that in terms of our constitution, the president of the ANC, that's what we have taken a resolve in Polokwane. The president of the ANC must become the candidate for the presidency of the country. The only problem we are dealing with is these times which are not aligned. The ANC conference is not aligned to the elections of the country. Now, the reason for recall was that we engaged and we were looking forward to an amicable solution, and we will then see what President Zuma's response is. But it's obvious that we want Comrade Ramaphosa to come in as the president of South Africa.
The ANC says they expect President Zuma will willingly, in the end, that he will formally respond to the decision by Wednesday. Now, they aren't yet planning a vote of no confidence, but it's not clear what will happen if he doesn't respond or tries to go down fighting. He hasn't been found guilty in any court. The ambiguity of the situation set the value of South Africa's currency tumbling. One of Zuma's wives even suggested in social media posts that the whole debacle was a Western conspiracy. Our reporter Trixie Ngado now reports on the intrigue surrounding Zuma's presidency.
South Africa's president finds himself in political hot water yet again. The recent displeasure with Jacob Zuma's performance stems from the party's poor election performance, his presidency's perceived poor performance in governance, as well as a range of corruption scandals dating back to 1999.
I've come to the conclusion that the circumstances dictate that in the interest of the Honourable Deputy President, the government, our young democratic system and our country, it would be best to release Honourable Jacob Zuma from his responsibilities as Deputy President of the Republic and member of the Cabinet.
Hey, Mr. Zuma, you and your government don't represent me. You represent your own interests. And I'm warning you, I really am warning you, out of love. I am warning you like I warned the nationalists.
Zuma, who has so far rubbished the call for him to relinquish leadership of South Africa, is under no constitutional obligation to step down. A parliamentary vote, however, could see him effectively kicked out. Since becoming president in 2009, Zuma has weathered an unprecedented number of political scandals. In 2015, Zuma sacked and hired 3 finance ministers in just 3 weeks, plunging the country's finance markets. The 75-year-old was also implicated in a corrupt multi-million-dollar arms deal that cast a long shadow into his presidency. In 2016, a court ruled that he did breach his oath of office by using government money to upgrade his sprawling Kandla home.
The National Treasury must determine the reasonable costs of those measures implemented by the Department of Public Works at the President's Nkandla homestead that do not relate to security, namely the visitor center, the amphitheater, the cattle kraal, the chicken run, and the swimming pool only.
Date when I will pay back the money. Firstly, there's no money that I'm going to be paying back without a determination by those who are authorized to do so as recommended by the public protector.
His most likely successor is Cyril Ramaphosa, who thwarted Zuma's ex-wife Dlamini Zuma's ambition for the ANC party leadership in a closely contested race. Trix Ingado, KTN News.
Thank you, Trix, for that report. Now, Zuma, a polygamous Zulu traditionalist with no formal education, has been living on borrowed time since Ramaphosa, union leader and lawyer once tipped as Mandela's pick to take over the reins, was elected as head of the 160-year-old ANC. In December, Ramaphosa narrowly defeated Zuma's ex-wife and preferred successor, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, in the leadership vote, forcing him to tread carefully in handling Zuma for fear of deepening rifts in the party a year ahead of an election. Now, despite the damning decision to order Zuma's recall, domestic media say the 75-year-old might yet defy the party's wishes, forcing it into the indignity of having to unseat him in Parliament. Here now is a report by Voice of America on the rise and fall of Jacob Zuma.
Very few people have divided South Africa as much as President Jacob Zuma. Mounting allegations of corruption and mismanagement have dogged him since he took office in 2009. But he has weathered 8 no-confidence votes.
And therefore, the motion of no confidence in the president is accordingly negative.
And even laughed in the faces of his critics. But his recent replacement as head of the African National Congress has significantly weakened the increasingly unpopular leader. Observers say he's long been an intriguing figure.
There are a number of different Jacob Zumas. There's the Jacob Zuma who is the liberation fighter, who spent time in jail, the struggle veteran. But there was always the other Jacob Zuma, the Jacob Zuma that had deep clouds of corruption and grafts hanging over his head.
Zuma's successor as ANC leader, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, promises to restore the party's credibility.
These challenges have been exacerbated by state capture, through which billions of rands have been illegally diverted to individuals, corruption in state-owned enterprises and other public institutions have undermined our government's programs to address poverty and unemployment, and they have weakened those institutions.
It is not the corruption allegations that bother South Africans most, say analysts. It is the pain they inflicted on the economy and on the party once led by the man Zuma considers his mentor, Nelson Mandela.
Zuma hasn't been able to grasp the mettle when it comes to innovative economic policy in South Africa. And without clear policy making, replaced by graft and corruption, the Zuma years largely has become a battle. It's been a battle for survival for the ANC, a battle for survival for most South Africans who saw graft and corruption really being at the forefront of policy rather than growth-oriented policies that would alleviate the very high unemployment rates in South Africa.
This, in part, is why the ANC clearly feels it cannot wait until Zuma's term ends in 2019. Pressure on him to resign has mounted in recent weeks. It is now so strong that even Zuma may be realizing it is time to say goodbye. Anita Powell, VOA News, Cape Town.
And I'm sure so many of you are asking, how powerful is this political party known as the ANC, the African National Congress, which has the power to recall a president whenever they feel like? Because this is not the first time. Thabo Mbeki also resigned after he was recalled because of allegations that he abused or because of office abuse. Now let's take a look at some history of the ANC, and we have some infographics for you. The ANC party is the Republic of South Africa's governing political party. And it has been the ruling party of post-apartheid South Africa on the national level, beginning with the election of Nelson Mandela in the 1994 election. And they won every election since 1994. And this is a party that was founded a very long time ago, back in the year 1912 on 8th January. That is why it's the oldest political party. Now, let's begin with Nelson Mandela. And of course, this is a man who has become almost synonymous with this political party. And he joined ANC in 1943. Apparently, this party was formed 6 years or about 7 years before he was born. Now, in the ANC, Mandela found the way to a free South Africa. Over to the next leader of the faces behind ANC is Thabo Mbeki, who served as the second president of South Africa from 14th June 1999 to September 2008. And that is where he resigned about 9 months left in his second term. Mbeki announced his resignation after being recalled by the National Executive Committee of the ANC following a conclusion by a judge of improper interference in the National Prosecuting Authority, well known as NPA, including the prosecution of Jacob Zuma for corruption. This is very interesting. And Motlanthe is the next. He served as the president of South Africa between 25th September 2008 and 9th May 2009, a very short stint there at the helm of South Africa. And this follows, of course, he took that position following the resignation of Thabo Mbeki. Now, over to the man everybody has been talking about, and that is Jacob Zuma. He is, of course, the fourth president and the current president of South Africa since the year 2009 general election, and now in his second 5-year term. Zuma is also referred to by his initials of JZ and his clan name Msholozi. And Zuma served as deputy president of South Africa, as I've already mentioned, from 1999 to 2005, but was dismissed by President Thabo Mbeki back in the year 2005 after Zuma's financial advisor, Shabir Shaik, was convicted of soliciting a bribe for Zuma. Zuma was nonetheless elected president of the African National Congress Party, that is ANC, on 18th December 2007, after defeating Mbeki at the ANC conference in Polokwane. I hope I got that right, but we have Bichachi, I'm sure he's going to correct me. And then on 20th September 2008, Mbeki announced his resignation after being recalled by ANC's National Executive Committee, and that is when the politics of Zuma gained life. So are we seeing history repeating itself this time round? Well, I think so. And in the studio, once again, we have Mark Bichache, political communication strategist. We have Bernard Medio-Tieno from Africa Peer Review Mechanism. We also have Dewa Maringa from the Human Rights Watch South Africa is joining me via Skype. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome to the program.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us.
Mark, let me begin with you. It's not often that we see, political parties calling, a president to resign. I mean, that's not very common in the continent. So what do you have to say about this, first of all?
the most interesting thing about the South African system, it's a proportional system, meaning that when you go to the ballot boxes, you do not vote for a candidate, you actually vote for a political party. So the political party remains very active throughout the lifespan of a parliamentarian or a president because he acts as a delegate of the party. In other words, the party delivers a list saying this is who we want for president, this is who we want for parliament, and based on how many votes, the percentage of votes that the particular party gets, then the party list, literally 50 people, 60 people, get to go into parliament based on that particular weight. So therefore, the South African system has always had emphasis on the party before the politician. The persona can never be greater than the politician. But in the South African context, what is interesting here is this is a case of the chickens coming home to roast for President Zuma, because this is the very same method that he used against his former president, Thabo Mbeki, because he was quite eloquent in his pursuit for becoming president and quite was able to manage the passions and the dreams of the Zulu nation in South Africa to propel him into high office. But now this is a question where his own tactics have come back to bite him in his behind, and therefore he's suffering from the consequences of his own tradition.
Well said. Now, Bernard, let's talk about this political party in question. And see, it's the oldest in Africa. Apparently the only political party that comes closest with the CCM from Tanzania. So is this some sort of a model that the rest of Africa should follow? You know, this is an equivalent of Jubilee asking the president, that is President Uhuru Kenyatta, to resign. I mean, is it good to have this kind of a strong, ideologically based political party in the rest of the continent?
It's very important that political parties should be institutionalized in the sense that they are not run by individuals, they are not co-opted by individuals, but they stand to be as institutions that can govern themselves through the structures that they have. When you look at ANC, you realize that they have different leagues. We have the ANC Women League and we have the Youth League, which are very vibrant. And you know, their main role is that, the beauty of it is that they have an internal mechanism whereby they can conduct oversight through their internal mechanism. And being driven by patronage as opposed to sycophancy and, you know, being driven by, you know, being patronage, being patriotic to their country, as opposed to in Kenya where you see that most political parties are driven by sycophancy, whereby the party leader becomes the head and, you know, he becomes the altar and matter. So we must borrow heavily from South Africa. However, that precedence is already being set. We saw deep down in Zimbabwe, where ZANU-PF took, you know, as a political party, took a mandate of ensuring that Mugabe left office.
But so Bernard, I'm sure you'll agree with me that came in very, very late, you know. That is, of course, let's stick to ANC for now. And let me engage Dewa, who is in South Africa. Now, Dewa, apparently, this man, Zuma, is a man who is facing about 783 corruption cases and is known to take apparently things that are not his. What are South Africans saying? What are South Africans saying? Are they in agreement with the ANC move?
Well, not entirely in agreement. There are a number of views coming forward. One, which is that, look, given the corruption charges, the challenges, the national government and economic mismanagement, really, it is time for Zuma to make way for fresh leadership. And you know that now, with Ramaphosa as the president of the ANC party, there are now two centers of power, which causes conflict and confusion, and hence the push to have Zuma step aside. But the ANC is very careful not to highlight the charges because they are saying he has not been convicted by any court of law. And as mentioned earlier in the program, Zuma comes from the powerful Zulu nation tribe, and therefore there are some who feel that perhaps this is victimization and are preparing to fight them. So if there is no common position, and this is why you see that perhaps Zuma is digging in and refusing to voluntarily step down.
Well said, Dewa. Stay with me because we're going to take a very short break, and of course we're going to discuss in detail the role of ANC and perhaps those who are criticizing the ANC, because we've seen some individuals who've defected from this political party. We'll have that discussion and much more right here on Bottomline Africa. Stay with us. We'll be We'll be coming back shortly.